This is the all-new, hyper-conspicuous and much talked about Honda Civic Type R, without a doubt one of the most hyped up cars of 2017, at least judging by the YouTube comments section. I mean, it's not hard to see why people are talking about this thing. It looks absolutely nutty. And you know what? It's the first time Canadians have had a chance to drive this thing and buy it on Canadian shores. No longer do we have to read about it in magazines. We can reach out and touch it, and better yet, we can drive it. So we're going to do that today. I'm going to talk about the interior and exterior features, spend a lot of time on the tech and performance behind this Type R, and then dive into how viable this is as a daily driver. So let's get in and see what all the hype's about. The elephant in the room is certainly the exterior design of this Type R. Some people love it, a lot of people not so much, but Honda does tell us that all this is functional. It's not just to look cool. So there's a lot going on the front end. Let's start here. The hood, which is aluminum rather than steel, that's to save weight, has a functional hood scoop. Apparently that was added very late in the production process. They realized they weren't getting the cold air that they needed to feed this engine, so they tacked that on. Moving down here to the front, you'll notice these giant, wonderful looking 20-inch wheels. Well, those wheels, because they're so tall and because they're so wide, come with a sort of negative aerodynamic effect. What has Honda done to solve that problem? They've got these super aggressive splitters on the front that look very cool, but have a function of creating what they call an air curtain. So it smooths the airflow around the front wheels to reduce some of the negative impact of those giant rims. Big, bold looking bumper, stylistically pretty interesting, but what that does is make sure that enough air can get into the engine bay through a duct here, also through the wheel well to cool down these brakes. So form definitely following function with this Type R, but the results are pretty crazy looking. So I've swung around back here, and this is really where the controversy begins. But let's start with this pretty cool feature. It's the rocker panel. Just like the splitter up front, it helps to create that air curtain to smooth the airflow around these really gigantic wheels back here. Up here on the roof, we have these funny little winglets and flips. And again, that's purposefully there to help direct air and clean it up so that by the time it hits the leading edge of the spoiler, it can create some actual downforce. This is not just for looks. It's 1 foot off of the back of the deck lid, and it actually generates downforce. Between Zach and I, there's probably 3 or 4 different videos on the 10th gen Civic, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the interior of this Type R because not a whole lot has changed. The number one thing, and you'll notice right behind my shoulder here, is this ridiculous and amazing racing seat. So not only does it look cool, but man, it does a fantastic job of holding you in the corners. You're not going anywhere. It's got some of the most aggressive bolstering I've had the pleasure of sitting my rear end in. Other than that, much of the same. It builds on the touring level Civic, so you've got a lot of the nice creature comforts that you'd find there, less Honda sensing, which is Honda's safety technology. It doesn't have heated seats, so you get these fancy bucket seats, but you lose the heated seats. The sound system is so-so, the infotainment system so-so again, but you know what? I'm willing to look past all those things because of how this thing drives on the road. So I think it's time we did that. So what makes a Type R a Type R? Well, this is basically an entirely different Civic. So let's start with the engine because that's the fun piece. We've got a 2-liter inline turbocharged 4-cylinder engine running a big old turbo with just over 20 pounds of boost. So the result is 306 horsepower, 295 foot-pounds. And the way that power comes on is actually kind of reminiscent of the old naturally aspirated engines of previous Type Rs, in that you get all that power up top, 6,500 RPM, but you get the torque down between 2,000 and 4,500. So the sensation is a very entertaining spooling up of turbo boost early on, and then all that power being delivered up at the top of the rev range. And let me tell you, this thing, it absolutely rips. It struggles for traction. Even in second gear, they're struggling for traction, and already I'm at going to jail speed. So this thing utterly rips. I've been really surprised at how fast this little car is, and part of that is because it's just a smidgen over 3,100 pounds. So 306 horsepower, 3,100 pounds, big fat sticky tires, and a 6-speed manual transmission. That is a recipe for fun. Okay, I know that 0 to 105.7 is not that fast these days, But this Type R is limited by the fact that it's putting all that power through the front wheels only. This is perhaps the Achilles heel of the Type R relative to its competition. It struggles to get traction in first and second gear, but trust me, once you're in third, this thing is savage. Furthermore, this thing gets there in such an entertaining way that I don't even care that I'm down a few tenths on the competition. I absolutely love this engine, but this Type R is about much more than just straight line speed. In fact, it's really got a completely revised chassis, completely revised suspension components, different transmission and different brakes. Let's walk through those things. So 13.8-inch drilled rotors up front by Brembo, 4-piston calipers, and man, these things can get you down to a stop from high speeds in a hurry with zero fade. Now we've got what Honda calls a dual axis strut system in the front. Now honestly, it's too complicated for me to understand. All you need to know is it's going to reduce torque steer, which always happens in high horsepower front wheel drive cars, and it's not completely eliminated here. It definitely tugs you over the road a little bit when you're spooling that power up, but overall it's really impressive. The suspension is also a lot firmer and is adaptive, of course. So we've got 3 modes down here via this toggle switch. You've got Comfort, which is surprisingly supple and usable day to day. You've got Sport, which is kind of the halfway point. And then you've got R Plus mode, which is the one that I spend most of my time in. Now that firms up the suspension. It makes the engine just a little livelier. It makes the auto rev matching feature much more aggressive, and it just kind of livens the car up and makes it feel like it's ready to go. The transmission, I can't gush about this enough. It's got a wonderful, very engaging, notchy feel to it. Short throw, requires a bit of muscle, but man, it's rewarding. A nice thunk when you put it into gear. The pedal box, perfectly spaced for rev matching. You don't need to rev match because this car has an auto rev match feature. For the heroes out there, you can turn it off in the settings panel, but frankly, it's better than the average person, certainly better than I'm able to muster with my own 2 feet. Now elsewhere, this car is 3 inches wider, and that's largely to accommodate the gigantic wheels, 245 series tires all around. Those are from Continental, and those are suitable for summer driving only. And actually, I'm not too sure about how great they'd be in the rain, but the result is super sticky. They can pull over a G in lateral force around corners, which is truly impressive and competes with some much more expensive vehicles. So combine that with a limited slip differential up front, and it's a car that puts the power down once you're rolling pretty well and hustles you around corners at a pace that you wouldn't believe. In fact, so much that this car currently holds the lap record at the Nürburgring for a front-wheel drive car. Check this out. So it looks super nutty and it drives that way as well, but what's this thing like as a daily driver? Well, the answer might surprise you. This is my driver's position, and as you can see, it's a bit tight for me in both legroom and headroom, but I'm 6'2", I'm on the tall side of things. You're probably not gonna have very many 6'2" drivers with 6'2" friends sitting in the back, so you're likely going to be fine. The Type R is built on the hatchback platform, which means best-in-class storage capacity and all that hatchback practicality. Fuel economy was okay, obviously not as good as the standard Civic, but we are dealing with a car with over 300 horsepower. So I was just over 12 liters per 100K, and you can bet that I was not hypermiling. This car takes premium fuel only, but I don't think that's going to be a problem for most people looking to buy a Type R. Overall, I've been really impressed with the livability of this Type R, given its crazy outward appearance and its performance capability. With the adaptive dampers in comfort mode, the suspension remains on the firm side, but it's not crashing, it's definitely livable. Let's talk about cash, because that seems to be a bit of a pinch point with people whenever we talk about the Type R. Now this is $42,000 in change here in Canada. There really aren't any options, you just pick your color and go. The Volkswagen Golf R, which is definitely one of the primary competitors of this vehicle, is about $1,000 cheaper in comparable spec. However, go across the aisle to Ford and the Focus RS is $6,000 more expensive than this Type R. Of course, you're going to get four-wheel drive, a little bit more power, a little more standard tech features, but it's minimal, and the difference above 100 kilometers an hour in terms of performance is, well, there's not much between them. So strangely, this Type R is kind of a bargain. Well, this Type R is certainly different. Whatever you think of the fact that Honda stuck with front-wheel drive, they slapped a turbo on it, they made it a little bit more expensive, and the car is bigger than ever before, you would have to admit that Honda has really, for the first time in a long time on North American shores, committed to one singular vision. This is a proper hot hatch. It looks zany, it drives the same way, and finally, it's available on North American shores. This is going to introduce a ton of young automotive enthusiasts to the excitement that the Honda brand can bring, and you no longer have to read about it in magazines or watch it on YouTube to learn about it. This is an excellent car. For Motormouth Canada, my name is Mike Gurr. Thanks for watching.